Afterlives with Colin Dardis. Today I'm joined by Helen Hastings, who is a poet, creative writing facilitator and mental health blogger. Thank you very much for joining me, Helen.
Hi Colin, yes, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much indeed.
As always, we just kind of start off asking our guests a little bit to find out about their own kind of beliefs and faith system.
Yeah.
So is there a particular term or ideology that you identify with the most?
To be honest with you, I tend to try and avoid labelling my belief too much. I suppose if you really wanted to label it, some people would say that what I believe in is sort of leans toward the pagan side of things. But really, I just consider myself spiritual. I find that, if you use the more concrete terms like pagan, you'll find that kind of conjured up a lot of kind of negative kind of visions in people's minds.
Almost like witchcraft.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not adverse to a little bit of witchcraft,
Better watch out.
Well, it's not really, what I would go out, impertinent or to say to somebody. I find that aspect of things gets a little childish.
Okay.
I sometimes find myself going on social media and you'll see people posting about their spiritual endeavours and their witchy endeavours and their pagan endeavours, and it kind of knocks on the door of insincerity for me. It's very ingenuine. I find it quite attention seeking, and it's not really my way of going. For me, spirituality is something that's very simple. You don't need to be seen to be doing something. You don't need to be uploading it every 5 minutes to a social media page. It's something, it can be, for me it's as simple as just opening my eyes every day and hoping that the day isn't going to be a complete disaster, and just endeavouring to be a reasonably good individual,
So when you mention a bit about an element of paganism as such, is there a connection to nature there as well, or do you strive for that?
Very, very much so. If anybody tries to question me about my faith, and I still don't want to use the big P word, I'll just say that I'm a spiritualist person and I follow an earth-based, nature-based faith.
Great. Okay.
And I'll hope that they don't ask any more questions, because, this conjured up all kind of weird stuff in people's minds. They imagine me, I don't know, dancing naked under the moonlight and telepathically summoning young men from the village and leading them astray amongst the corn or something. That's not true, unfortunately. But I don't want, I don't like people to talk about me. I don't really want to, just be too blunt with how I discuss my faith. It's not really anybody's business.
That's okay.
Which is a bit of a contradiction, saying I'm on a podcast.
We're here and we're talking about it. That's all right. So, I'm just wondering how that then impacts on, kind of day-to-day existence, or maybe a sense of morality, or even just your own sense of hope, perhaps, and how you deal maybe with challenges, how you would lean into your spiritual side for guidance and support.
Yeah. When your faith is kind of based in sort of nature and the lesser spoken deities, it's simplified and you suddenly find yourself looking at things differently. There's a lot of people who will go to the big church on a Sunday, they worship God, they really push the fact of how Christian they are, but they'll walk past nature every single second of their lives and just ignore it. So what my faith tends to do is it kind of wakes you up to the church of the ground beneath your feet, the church of the tree, the church of the weed that's managing to sprout up from between the cracks in the pavement. The whole world's a church, Um, and that for me is kind of where the comfort comes in, because you realize that there's magic everywhere. And a lot of people who are sort of more grounded in their beliefs that you have to be getting dressed up in your designer suit and driving your top of the range Audi to the posh church, you know. I think that's something that's kind of lost on a lot of people, you know. And I'm not denouncing all people of all Christian faith, you know, but I really do feel that there's kind of a lot of image involved sometimes in a lot of different faiths, and no matter what it is, I just feel that it simplifies a lot of things, you know, because you're kind of reading between the lines of the world. You know, you're kind of just, you're watching out for things that other people might miss. You know, you become more connected with the seasons, I think, as well, and the way the world changes around you.
So within your own personal spirituality and that connection to nature, is there much of a concern regarding the afterlife or the next life or whatever might be beyond this life?
Well, define concern.
Is it something that is kind of forward in the teachings or writings out there about spirituality?
My beliefs in the afterlife probably do differ a lot from sort of the Christian side of things, certainly. But no, I don't really have concerns. I I just kind of have a way of kind of going through life and just hoping that whatever's on the other side is going to be good to me. But no, I don't really have a massive amount of concerns about the teachings of things.
Is there a belief in some kind of heaven and hell at all?
Well, yes, there is. There is definitely. Heaven for me is not, how do you put this? It's not a belief. It's what I hope. It's what I wish for. I don't really believe in this one particular place where we're all going to converge, you know, and it's all going to be all white, fluffy and gold gilt, you know, and it's all going to be lovely and angels farting about everywhere, and, you know, I don't really believe in that kind of a place. I mean, I like my own space. I love the idea of getting into the afterlife and it kind of working like a big manifestation of all your favourite memories and a manifestation of all the places in your life, different stages of your life where you felt safe and protected.
Interesting. Okay.
And I love the idea that we can just, for want of a better term, just open doors into whatever part we want to. I could be in the house I grew up in. I could be at a poetry reading, you know. I could be at a friend's house. I could be in a forest. I could be in a favourite park, you know. I could be in my mother's house in County Down. I could be then suddenly transported into the little cottage I live in now and that I love so much. I just love the idea of being able to flit between those places and all the people in my life that made me feel secure and loved and happy.
And is this something you think you would have control of? That you would be sitting there going, okay, I want to think about my mother more, so let's visit an image of her when I was 5? Or is there an external agent that's kind of moving you between these different rooms?
Oh, maybe it's a bit of both, you know. By external agent, I guess you're talking about God.
Whatever label you want to put on it, yeah.
God or goddess, or, well, do you know something? For me, it's like it's different deities. I don't really feel too comfortable with the idea of there being only one true God. I've never really felt quite comfortable with that. It would be something that would have very little control from a third party. I would imagine, you know, for me personally, this is just my personal hope and wish for what the afterlife looks like. No, I mean, I think it would be very much in your control. because if it was really controlled by somebody else, that would kind of go against what my beliefs lie anyway.
And within this, then, suppose I'm trying to physically think about it as in, I imagine some kind of museum or a big maze, and you can go in room by room and, as you said, visit different thoughts and different memories and even different people. Is that kind of how you see it in your imagination?
I guess I just see it as a way of being, really. And it's not maybe a physical kind of place or a building or a compartmentalization in the physical sense. It's more just this kind of lovely, kind of collective array of memories and feelings and emotions that just kind of happen in a way that is physically hard to describe, really. It's just something that maybe, comes from the heart. Maybe it's something that we can feel more than see in the afterlife.
It's definitely evident that there's more an emphasis on emotions and feelings and mood rather than, as you said, any kind of maybe physical interaction. And I wonder if that perhaps is influenced by your background in mental health blogging and advocacy.
I mean, who knows? We could get to the afterlife and we might have lost our physical bodies altogether. Maybe we'll just be some kind of funny, fluffy, glittery energy that kind of just sparkles and feels happy all the time and just flips between worlds. I don't know.
There's an importance to avoid sadness or despair, it would seem.
I can't imagine if we go to the afterlife there'll be much room for despair.
What about, is there a hell that exists that maybe all those elements are there?
No. This is where we start to walk on quite contradictory territory, right?
We're allowed to do that here. That's okay.
Well, I'm glad, because the subject of hell in the Christian teaching, say for example, the subject of hell is what had always created the barrier between myself and organised religions. It's contradictory for me to say that, because I always discuss in my spirituality, I say, I believe in universal balance. You can't have the good without the bad, yin without the yang. How can you have this one good place and not have the bad place? But the fact of the matter is, in Christianity, we talk about this gorgeous, all-seeing, all-loving, forgiving God, that loved everybody and forgives us our sins. And so why then is this God threatening hell? Why suddenly all these conditions that state that we have to live in this way and followed by this book? So we don't end up in eternal damnation in this horrible fiery pit with this Lucifer guy. And it's that when things get too contradictory for me, it doesn't make any sense. And I think, well, hold on a minute. My dad was an all-round good guy, but he wasn't a believer. Now, for me, if God is the God that I imagine him to be, or her to be, he's going to say, well, or they are going to say, well, you know what? This guy, he didn't believe in me. He didn't buy the book I brought out. But But he was an all-round good guy. He lived really justly. He lived really nobly. He looked after himself and his family and his friend and any animals that were in his care. He was a good all-round kind dude. Yeah, I'm not going to send him to hell. Why would I do that? That's the God I believe in, and that's why hell is something that I find really difficult. Who was it who said hell with other people?
Jean-Paul Sartre.
Okay, well, something, that there's a lot of hell to be found on this planet at the moment.
So is this why nature is so appealing? There's an escapism?
Very much so. I was having a cup of coffee recently in my kitchen, and it was a really nice morning, and the sun was coming through and shining through the trees outside, and it was throwing all manner of shapes across the kitchen, and it was so lovely and so nice. And I'm watching this, and all of a sudden I just thought, is this what Putin does?
Right.
Does he sit with his morning coffee, watch the sun coming through the trees, and then go out and bomb Ukraine? Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't take into consideration the sun throwing shapes through the trees at all. And maybe he should. Maybe this is wrong. This is where we're all going wrong, you know? And it sounds so simplified. But,
it's a scary thought that Putin would do that and then still be able to turn around and massacre thousands.
I think so. But, you know, it's silly kind of thoughts like that go through my mind. And it sounds really naive and it sounds really silly. But I often wonder that if all the evils in the world, all of a sudden, at the same time, in some kind of Matrix-inspired, seismic kind of a shift thing, all suddenly thought a good thought all at one time, would they break a spell? Do you know? Would they break a spell and suddenly things would be nice again? I don't know.
It's an interesting thought.
It is
nevertheless, definitely.
Interesting thought, yeah.
Each week I share a short poem inspired partly by the conversations that I've had with my guest. This one is called Deaf Dreams. It's usually the same. The grandparents waiting, a childhood dog running to them, a mother getting to hold her lost child again, the weight of arms, of bodies, of connection around us. In the face of the unknown, we seek the familiar. For years, I dreamt my father as a background character, seen in the middle distance, a silent observer. No angel, no guardian, no messenger, just a portrait, a landmark, and anchor where the rest of the dream bobbed on waves of whimsy and fancy. When we did eventually speak, I woke up not remembering what was said, only that we had said something, which was enough. For what we cherish most from conversations anyway isn't the detail, but the warmth, the home fire that does not die, the space left open for us at the hearth. So you mentioned about your father there, and obviously when we do lose loved ones, it's when perhaps we think about afterlife the most, or the possibility of an afterlife. And when your father passed away, was that something that kind of helped or forced to formulate your views?
My dad was a complete atheist, really, but knew a lot about the Bible. He studied the Bible a lot because he felt it was important to do it from a history point of view. Okay, so my dad, though, would frequently say something that we thought was a bit strange. He'd say, I really do feel jealous of those who have a faith, because it must be such a lovely thing to have. And I think that my father had genuinely tried to search for it within himself, but couldn't find it. He was just too scientific. You know, it was just something that was never going to work for him. But yeah, he would say that quite a bit. And my mother was quite Christian, but not overly so. You know, she quietly practiced her belief, and he quietly practiced his non-belief, and they never overcrowded each other, you know, which I think was actually a really nice way to grow up. I grew up quite open-minded about Christianity and faith in general, or a lack of faith, you know. My dad was an engineer. Radios were his speciality. Okay, he was in the RAF and he worked for Marconi's, and then he came to work in Belfast at UTV. So he was around radios a lot, he was around televisions a lot, and that was his kind of forte. Electronics were very much his thing. And after he died, something very strange started to happen in our home, because before he died, my mum and dad would sometimes have these sort of serious but not so serious at the same time conversations about death and life and everything in between. And my dad would say to my mum, well, look, okay, if when I die and I get to the other side, and there is in fact the other side, and there's an afterlife and there's a God, I'll find a way of getting in touch. And my mum would say in response, she would say, oh yes, please do. I would love that. Please do. And they had this conversation several times, and she would always remind him about this. Now, you need to get in touch with me, because there was quite an age gap. So it was always assumed that my dad probably would go before my mum, which he did. One of the things in the house that, we associated with our dad a lot was a very old 1960s radio that sat by my father's bedside, the whole of my life. I think the whole of their married lives. In life, my dad would wake up in the early hours, not be able to get back to sleep, and he would turn the radio on quietly until he dropped off again, So after my dad died, I think it was about maybe a month or so after my dad died, the radio started switching on in the middle of the night.
Wow.
It would just turn itself on. It would the volume would go up and down a bit, and then it would switch itself off. And my mother was convinced this was him, wasn't one bit afraid, would acknowledge him and say, yes, I know that's you, Bill. And this happened loads of times. And my mum would just be woken up with a radio in the middle of the night in the pitch darkness, and she would just say, yes, Bill, hello there, and then she would just go to sleep with the radio still playing. Then I witnessed it myself. This was actually during the day. I was on my own in the house, and I was about to go out to work, and the radio switched on just as I was passing. So I found myself doing the same thing. I just acknowledged my dad and then went on out to work.
Did you ever find any particular significance in any song that was playing on the radio or anything that was broadcast?
No, but it was always Radio 4, because my dad always had the radio tuned to Radio 4 because he was an avid Radio 4 fan. So my mum just always kind of didn't mess about with it. She just kind of made sure it was always tuned into Radio 4, and that was that. And then there was one morning she was getting up and it happened again. So she was going out somewhere, so she turned it off herself, and she went down into the kitchen, and the radio in the kitchen was making a weird noise. When it was turned off, it was making a static noise. So she just, again, acknowledged my dad, and that was it. But the weird thing about this was, we were never afraid. It didn't even, now most people would just find that the creepiest, most weird thing going, but we just didn't.
It's like your dad said, don't you dare turn me off, I'll jump over to this other radio set here and continue the conversation.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was. And yeah, it was very, very strange, but it would have been the absolute ideal way that my dad would have communicated, because radios were his life's work. It was very much just Mum and I, after my dad died, trying to sort things out, and there was a lot of things going on at that time. So, I think we just thought it was, for the most part, nice.
It definitely is. It's a lovely story.
Now, the radio did eventually break. Whether it could have been that the radio had, in fact, just developed a fault and was switching itself off and on, the volume going up and down in the middle of the night. It could just be that was all just a big coincidence. I don't know. I don't think so.
Maybe it's best just to accept it and not overanalyze.
I like to.
Yeah,
I like to.
Now, you had mentioned that your dad kind of recognised that people do find kind of comforts and a type of bedrock in faith, and said, I wish I did have that for myself. So if someone maybe said that to you, and based on your own views, I mean, what would your advice be? Would it be get out there into the outside world?
I think my advice to them would be, first of all, go within and do what your heart is telling you first. Is there any specific thing you want to do right now? Do you feel like going outside? Do you feel like just screaming into the heavens? What do you feel like doing? Because, where religion is concerned, it's another subject in this world which is just so subjective. Everybody has their own ideas and their own opinions, and they're all ready to force it, even if they don't mean to force it. So for me, Christianity was never going to work for me. But whenever I was very, very young, I remember knowing that I believed in something but couldn't really put a name to it, couldn't really figure out what it was. And I can remember coming into contact with some more spiritualist people as I got older, and realising, listening to them speak and realising that, there was in fact a place and a name for what I believed in, even though I don't like to name it too much. My overriding bit of advice would be, do what feels right within you. Because if a religion or a faith is not coming right from the heart, if it's not really speaking to you, then it's not working for you, I don't think. I mean, I remember talking to someone once who said, oh, you should never label it, you just find your own beauty and be happy with finding your own beauty. And I think that's really important. But there are so many different ways in which you can practice a faith, and there's no hard and fast rules. There should be no rule books. And also, I can think of people I know who kind of intertwine different faiths. For example, I would find myself kind of leaning a little bit sometimes toward Catholicism, even though my father was from quite a staunch Catholic family, even though he didn't practice. And I love the feel of an old church, or either an old chapel or an old Church of Ireland, I love the feel of that. And there is a part of me that leaned a little bit towards those teachings as well, even though for me the Bible had a lot of barriers that come up personally and emotionally for me. So my advice would also be, don't feel that you have to slot into one spiritual box. Educate yourself while exploring and observing how you feel emotionally with everything.
Well, I think that advice will definitely give our listeners a lot to contemplate, and thank you very much indeed for your time today, Helen.
Thank you very much indeed, Colin. I've really enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you to my guest, poet, creative writing facilitator and mental health blogger Helen Hastings. And as always, big thanks to the Arts Council of Northern Ireland for their kind support of the podcast through the support for the Individual Artists Programme.